Okay, moving on to renewable energy. The core strategy will seek development to maximise on-site renewable energy to achieve at least 20% reduction of carbon dioxide emissions and, where feasible, towards zero carbon emissions. Which forms of on-site renewable energy are most effective in Westminster, taking into account local historic environment, air quality and the potential for site constraints? And we've certainly talked about this in the session before the break, but was there anything further anyone wanted to add?
So I just want to ask what your evidence base is that 20% is achievable.
Well, in terms of 20%, obviously we don't operate in a vacuum, and we are bound by what's obviously in the London plan. So obviously that is one of the reasons why we're looking at this policy approach.
Sorry, but what's your evidence base that it's achievable?
Well, I'm not sure we're actually saying it is achievable. Because it's in the London plan, and we have to be in line with the London plan.
I just wanted to put the caveat, it does say we're feasible, so it's, you know, you look at it on a case-by-case basis.
When it says we're feasible towards zero carbon emissions, is that an obligation on the developer to demonstrate why they can't achieve zero carbon?
Yes.
But you haven't defined zero carbon?
As yet.
When's your core strategy due out?
It's going to the LDF committee on the 1st of September, so it'll be publicly available at least, I would say, 2 weeks before that.
And if the definition of zero carbon is due out at the earliest... There's a bit. I'm just pointing out there's a bit of a discrepancy.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, obviously, whenever you're writing policy, the policy that wraps around it, both regionally and nationally, is constantly changing. I think we had to have something in our core strategy, but obviously, I certainly take your point.
Yeah, it's just a question: if developments are coming forward now and they're being taken, you know, they're master planning now and they're at stage C design, and they see this as an emerging policy and they're going to submit the application early next year. You know, it's almost an impossible situation for a developer to actually know what they're going to be expected to have to do in terms of zero carbon.
If you could meet your renewables, your 20% or whatever, by sticking a windmill in your building, and yet the embodied energy in manufacturing that windmill was higher than the amount of carbon it saved, would that still be acceptable?
I suppose it raises the question, how do you work out the embodied energy? It depends where it's come from, who made it, what materials they use, and is that information quantifiable from us as a planning authority?
You ought to expect it from the manufacturer of the windmill. I mean, it's entirely quantifiable, I'm sure. But the point is, I mean, you know, it's a slightly cynical question. The point is, again, about a focus on it's renewable, but, you know, is it actually saving carbon? Is it a gesture? And the other part of that is 20% of what? 20% of a starting point of, you know, what's the 100%, and what do you do to drive down the 100% before you then ask for the 20%?
Good point.
The point I wanted to make was in relation to I don't know whether you would class this as renewable, but to the feedstock for local energy generation. One of the things that Westminster produces, or certainly the Central Activity Zone, is a lot of waste. Now, a huge proportion of that can be recycled, but particularly in relation to food waste, again, taking an area like Soho and Chinatown, tremendous concentration of restaurants and bars and so on. There's compostable, putrescible material that could be used certainly to provide compost, but maybe anaerobic digestion, which will produce a methane gas, which is a form of power. So could again, it's a horses for courses thing, but and then taking out the flexibility point, but perhaps some of the policies could refer to doing that, because the other benefit with that is also you have waste miles. At the moment, all the waste that's generated in this area travels quite long distances, And actually, if the waste that's generated and will continue to be generated in the centre of a capital city around food, entertainment, leisure, let alone office uses and so on, could actually go into providing power, there are opportunities for small-scale carbon capture, scrubbing the scrubbing the flues so that the emissions are very low, and so on. So that these technologies may not be here now, but a bit like zero carbon, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, certainly during the life of the LDF, localised energy production based around waste might be possible in some circumstances.
It links, the comment I want to make is it links to both this previous remarks and the one before that. It's just to stress the need for somehow the planning system to take account of the whole issue of embodied energy, which it really doesn't at the moment. And it always comes up in dribs and drabs when committees are dealing with it, and references are made, but there's limits on what can be asked for. And there's certainly no built-in assumption that will be one of the things that is considered. And I think right across the board, it ought to be part of it. And it's going back to the earlier part of the meeting, actually, in fact, that comes out of this, the points that have just been made.
Okay, thank you.
There's a point on waste heat from the gentleman earlier. There's a North London waste heat project that's sort of going ahead, the councils are looking at. But the footprint of one of these anaerobic digestion systems is so large that it would be very difficult for a developer to create value as well as installing one of those systems on their particular site. So it would have to, the location of it would be quite difficult. With regards to the question, I have a real difficulty in the sector, the mix-up between heat and power and energy encompassing both of them. Generating heat's, okay, we can find sustainable solutions to that. Generating power in a tight urban environment is the real key focus here if you're looking at zero carbon. You have basically 3 options. We've talked about waste heat briefly. There's wind turbines, PVs, CHP doesn't contribute. So wind turbines, Glastonbury House, mentioned earlier, there's planning permission for 3 wind turbines to go on the top of the tower. Due to cost implications, they weren't put up there. They could be put up at a future date. We worked on a scheme that was looking to achieve level 6 Code for Sustainable Homes. So that would have been zero carbon. You're talking approximately 50 metres squared of PV per unit. Those sort of figures are really scary. I don't, for achieving 20% renewables, obviously that's much less, but that cost implication is very important because it's how much those kilograms of carbon cost to be saved is the figures that are going to be feeding into your local council funds. So it's a really tricky situation, the zero carbon and the power question and how much it costs to generate power.
So you're suggesting that, and I think it's been suggested more widely, that in terms of looking at achieving that 20%, there should be, as part of the assessment, some assessment of the lifetime costs of actually delivering that. And would there also be a suggestion of looking at other things that, for the same amount of money, could achieve the same savings? I mean, that's been raised earlier tonight. I mean, they're 2 quite different things, with the support for the second as well, that rather than insisting on a 20% renewable, they may just say, well, we'll do this instead, and it would actually achieve the same savings.
Yet again, there's this question of how far over over the government's policy you want to go, because the government's policy will have that in place anyway in their pathway to zero carbon. So do you want to create a fund over and above the Code for Sustainable Homes Fund? That's a really key question. How much is a tonne of carbon?
Okay, thank you.